It begins with a question that has never been answered. Why did the men of the Blackwood Colliery walk into the mine on the morning of June 17, 1877, and never walk out again? Pottsville, Pennsylvania, was at the heart of the anthracite coal region. It was a place of soot, narrow streets, and endless shafts burrowed into the hills. That summer, the press was filled with reports of unrest. The Molly Maguires, an alleged secret society of Irish miners, were being tried and executed. Tension between immigrant workers and mine owners had reached its breaking point, and in the shadows of this turmoil, something darker unfolded. On June 18th, the Pottsville Miners Journal printed a short notice buried beneath court reports. 5 men of the Blackwood Colliery, having failed to return from their night's work, are presumed missing. Searches have revealed nothing save for markings along the inner tunnels, of which no miner admits responsibility. At first, it was assumed that the men had fled. Strikes and desertions were common, and newspapers were eager to connect every disappearance to the Molly Maguires. Yet the families insisted otherwise. They testified that their husbands and sons had left their homes with lamps and tools, intending to work as always. By the 3rd day, when no trace was found, the colliery superintendent ordered a deeper inspection of the galleries. The rescuers reported a silence unlike they had ever known underground. Normally, one could hear the distant picks of other men, the drip of water, the groan of timber. But as the crew advanced into the south shaft, there was nothing, just a cold draft, and on the wall, symbols scratched into the coal. The markings were crude, but deliberate. Circles crossed with lines, shapes resembling ladders, and something that looked like an open eye. When these were reported in the Miners' Journal, many dismissed them as graffiti, yet in the Irish quarter of town, whispers began, "The curse has come." A widow named Mary O'Donnell, whose husband was among the missing, told a reporter, "They said the Molly Maguires were hanged for justice, but you don't hang shadows. You don't hang what follows a man below ground. My Patrick went into that mine, and the mine swallowed him whole." By the end of June, more men had vanished. 2 search parties entered the same tunnels and returned pale, claiming they had seen figures moving in the lamplight, figures that retreated into the darkness without a sound. One man refused to descend again, stating that he had heard the clamor of picks on stone, though no hand struck them. The company sought to quiet the matter. Production could not halt. Coal was the blood of Pennsylvania industry. Officially, the missing were branded deserters, yet rumors grew. Local priests noted an increase in confessions, men speaking of strange dreams, of black faces appearing at their bedside, of hearing the muffled cough of miners outside their homes at night. In early July, a photographer named Charles W. Green was invited to document the mine. He set up his bulky camera at the entrance of the south shaft and captured a series of plates. When developed, one image showed a smudge in the far corner of the gallery, a blurred form that resembled a man crouching. Green insisted it was nothing but a defect in the exposure. The print survives in the county archives, its corners yellowed, its surface scratched. To those who have examined it, the shape is unmistakable. Still, life in Pottsville continued. Children played in the streets, wives carried water from the wells, and trains loaded with coal rattled eastward toward Philadelphia. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm, fear spread. Some miners carried crosses or small pouches of salt into the pits. Others refused to work the south shaft at all. By August 1877, the name "The Blackwood Curse" appeared in the local press. One editorial, half sneer and half warning, declared, "We are not given to superstition, but it cannot be denied that the colliery has been visited by an unaccountable calamity. Whether by the cowardice of the men, the mischief of secret orders, or by darker agencies, we cannot say. What is certain is this: a number of able-bodied miners have disappeared into the earth, and none have returned." The company attempted one final measure: to seal the deepest galleries with brick. On the day of the sealing, a crowd of women gathered outside the mine, weeping and shouting that their husbands were still inside. The superintendent ignored them. Bricks were laid, cement hardened, and the tunnels were entombed. But in the nights that followed, The watchmen swore they heard knocking from behind the walls. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. By the fall of 1877, the story of the Blackwood Colliery was no longer confined to the pages of the Pottsville Miners' Journal. Newspapers from Philadelphia and New York carried brief but sensational reports. Whole gangs of miners vanish underground. Strange symbols in colliery galleries. The Molly Maguires beyond the grave? Each article was careful to note that details were unverified, yet the effect was the same. Blackwood was whispered about as a place of dread. In October, a state inspector named Thomas L. Geely was dispatched to examine the mine. His official report, filed with the Department of Mines, still survives. It begins with sober technical descriptions of the shafts, the condition of timbering, the ventilation. But midway through, the tone changes. It is my duty to state that while within the southern gallery I experienced a sensation difficult to describe. The air was dense, though no gas was present, and an unaccountable vibration, as if from distant machinery, could be felt beneath the feet. 2 accompanying men swore they heard a voice. I did not hear it myself, but I cannot dismiss the fear exhibited by those present. Greeley concluded with the recommendation that the gallery remain sealed. He did not speculate further. Yet sealing did not bring peace. In December, 2 brothers, Michael and Sean Flannery, attempted to break through the brickwork in hopes of rescuing their missing cousin. Their picks rang out for hours before they stopped. The next morning, only their tools remained. It was after this that the first letters arrived at the offices of the Miners' Journal. Written in shaky hands, unsigned, they claimed that the missing man had been taken below by something that lived deeper than coal. One letter, preserved in the archives, reads, "Do not dig further. The earth is hollow with voices. They marked us and we cannot leave. Seal it fast or more will follow." Skeptics dismissed the letters as the work of agitators, but whispers grew among the townsfolk. Some said that before each disappearance, the victim had been seen speaking alone in the streets, nodding as if to an invisible companion. Others swore that lights flickered in the mine after midnight, though no lamp was burning. In early 1878, a traveling photographer returned to Blackwood to document conditions for the state. His glass plates show miners posing stiffly with picks, women standing at the shaft's mouth, children in ragged clothes. But among them, one image has been examined again and again, the group portrait of 7 miners, their faces stern, coal dust on their cheeks. Behind them, in the black mouth of the shaft, is a shape that should not be there. It is no trick of shadow. The outline suggests a man taller than any present, with arms too long, leaning toward the camera. The photographer himself, when confronted, denied manipulation. "The camera captures what the eye cannot see," he remarked. Within weeks, he left Pottsville and never returned. As winter dragged on, fear began to warp daily life. Wives refused to let their husbands enter the mine. Children woke screaming at night, claiming they heard tapping under the floorboards. One priest, Father Keating, recorded in his diary that he had been called to bless a house where the sound of breathing issued from the cellar, though no one was there.
The mine owners, desperate to restore order, hired Pinkerton detectives. Their task was to prove that the disappearances were acts of sabotage by surviving Molly Maguires. For a brief time, the plan seemed plausible. The detectives claimed they had evidence of underground meetings, hidden tunnels, coded messages. But when one detective descended into the south shaft to investigate, he emerged trembling and incoherent. He resigned the next morning. His written statement, fragmentary, survives in the archives. Quote, "A procession of lights, not lamps, they moved without flame, without smoke, and voices reciting in a tongue I have never heard. I am a man of reason, but I will not enter again." End quote. By the spring of 1878, production at Blackwood had nearly ceased. The colliery lay half idle, its machinery rusting, its tracks overgrown with weeds. Families left Pottsville, seeking work in other towns. Yet not all departed. Some stayed, bound by grief or by a strange loyalty to the place. These were the ones who claimed to see their missing kin in the streets at night, pale, silent figures that vanished when approached. An article from May 1878 describes one such encounter. Quote, Mrs. Catherine Byrne declares she beheld her husband deceased these 12 months standing upon the porch of their home. He raised his hand as if to speak, then turned, and in the act of stepping into the roadway was lost to sight. End quote. The editors added only, the lady is no doubt mistaken, but her sincerity is beyond question. And so the question remained, were the missing miners victims of crime, of collapse, of hysteria? Or had the mine indeed opened onto something older, something nameless beneath the hills of Pennsylvania? The answers would not come quickly, for in the summer of 1878, the Blackwood Colliery closed its gates. The entrances were sealed with stone and timber. The machinery sold, and the name Blackwood faded from official records. But the stories persisted, carried in whispers from tavern to tavern, from mother to child. And then, in the archives of Schuylkill County, a final note appears, dated September 1879. A clerk tasked with cataloging abandoned properties recorded that on his inspection of the Blackwood site, he heard 3 knocks from inside the sealed shaft. He noted it without comment, as if reluctant to elaborate. The document ends with a single line, scrawled in the margin. They are still below. The Blackwood Colliery was abandoned in 1878, its entrances sealed with stone and timber. For a time, nature seemed to reclaim it. Weeds grew over the tracks, rainwater pooled in the pits, and the wooden head frames collapsed. By the dawn of the new century, only a few remembered the old curse.
But archives reveal that the silence did not last. In 1901, a surveyor named Henry Pritchard visited the site as part of a county assessment. His notes, preserved in the Schuylkill County records, mention the condition of the land, the overgrowth, and the remains of machinery. But one passage stands apart. The southern entrance, though sealed, gives off a draft of air unnatural to such a structure. Standing near, I heard what seemed the strike of hammer upon rock at regular intervals. No work is done here, nor has been these 20 years. I left the place with unease. That same year, the Pottsville Republican printed a small item about children trespassing at the old mine. According to the paper, 3 boys reported seeing a procession of lamps within the shaft at night, though the entrance was fully sealed. The article treats it as childish fancy. But weeks later, one of the boys, Patrick Malloy, aged 12, vanished on his way home from school. His body was never found. By the first decade of the 20th century, stories of Blackwood had drifted into folklore. Yet every so often, an event forced the legend back into public memory. In 1907, during the Great Coal Strike, a group of union men met in Pottsville to rally support. Among them was an elderly miner named John Riley, who had once worked at Blackwood. A stenographer recorded his speech. They talk of wages and rights, but I tell you, we fought the mine itself. I saw men swallowed by it, one by one. You think it closed? It is not closed. The earth does not close. The audience laughed nervously, but Riley did not smile. He died 2 months later, and in his obituary, it was noted that his final words were, "They are knocking again." Perhaps the most chilling archival fragment comes from 1912, when a traveling photographer, Edward Markham, attempted to capture the ruins of Blackwood for a book on industrial decay. His plates, preserved in the Library of Congress, show the skeletal remains of machinery, overgrown shafts, and the brick-sealed south gallery. On one plate, faint but visible, are marks across the surface of the bricks, deep scratches, as if made by fingernails. When questioned, Markham insisted that he had not altered the negative. He wrote, "I only record what is there, but if you look closely, you will see faces in the mortar."
That remark was dismissed as a trick of light, an artist's exaggeration. Yet when the plate is magnified, faint contours indeed suggest human features, mouths open, eyes hollow, pressed against the wall from the other side. The county attempted once more to erase the legend. In 1915, the remains of the colliery were leveled. The sealed entrances were covered with soil, and the land was marked for sale. But potential buyers always withdrew. Some claimed the ground was unstable, others that workers refused to clear the site. The truth is less clear. One worker, interviewed decades later, claimed that during the leveling he found a timber beam marked with strange carvings. Not letters, not numbers, but signs like a ladder and a circle. They burned it quick and no one spoke. By the 1920s, the mine had passed fully into rumor. Children dared one another to walk the overgrown paths at night. Travelers reported lights flickering among the trees. And in 1927, a letter appeared in the Philadelphia Inquirer, written by an anonymous former resident of Pottsville. "I warn all not to disturb the old colliery grounds. The voices remain. I myself heard them last fall when leaves were dry and wind was still. 3 knocks as from within the earth, then silence. This is no tale for children. It is truth, and those who doubt may test it at their peril." The letter was printed on the second page without commentary. No one claimed authorship. It was during this period that the first comparisons to the Molly Maguires returned. Some suggested that the executed man from 1877 had cursed the land, that their restless spirits still roamed. Others believed the miners had broken into a cavern older than memory, and still others dismissed it as hysteria, though none would spend a night on the grounds. A final document from 1929 deepens the mystery. It comes from a state geologist, Professor William H. Kent, who surveyed abandoned mine lands across Pennsylvania. His typewritten report is orderly and precise until he reaches Blackwood. The southern tract is remarkable. Subsoil vibration was measured at intervals of 7 seconds without discernible cause. No machinery operates within 20 miles. Residents speak of luminous phenomena near the site. It is my professional opinion that natural explanations do not suffice. Recommend no further excavation. This report was filed, then quietly forgotten. Months later, the stock market crashed, and Blackwood was lost amid the greater calamities of the Depression.
Yet the record remains. The scratches on the bricks, the knocks heard in the night, the photographs with shadows that should not be there, and always the same refrain: they are still below. The final chapter of Blackwood's history begins in 1930. The nation was deep in the Depression, and forgotten places drew the curiosity of journalists eager for stories. Among them was Frederick Hale, a writer for the Philadelphia Record who specialized in human interest features. In the spring of that year, Hale traveled to Pottsville to collect accounts of the old colliery. His article, published in May, opens with an unsettling line: "The mine is closed, the ground is quiet, but the people whisper as if it still breathes." Hale interviewed townsfolk who remembered the vanished miners, now spoken of like figures of legend. Some laughed, dismissing the tales as superstition of a bygone age. Others refused to speak at all, shutting doors at the mention of Blackwood. But one man, aged and nearly blind, gave Hale a story that could not be dismissed. This was Patrick O'Donnell, nephew of one of the first men lost. He recalled standing, as a child, outside the south shaft on the day it was sealed. He said, "They bricked it shut, but as they laid the last stones, I heard my uncle's voice calling from within. Clear as I hear you now. He said my name 3 times. Then it was gone." Hale's piece caused a stir, enough that a small group of amateur historians and spiritualists organized an expedition to the abandoned site in August of 1930. Among them were Hale himself, a photographer named Leonard Price, and a young folklorist from Philadelphia, Eleanor Cross. Their stated aim was to separate fact from fable. County officials gave reluctant permission, provided they disturbed no ground. The group set out with notebooks, lanterns, and cameras. Price's surviving photographs, now brittle, sepia-stained, show the group standing in weeds shoulder-high, the crumbling stonework of the mine in the background. The mood in the images is oddly strained. None of the participants smile. In her journal, Eleanor Cross recorded the first night. "We set up camp near the southern gallery. The air is heavy, though the evening is cool. After sundown, Mr. Hale reports hearing rhythmic sounds, 3 strokes, repeating. Mr. Price swears he saw a figure in the trees, though no one else did. We retired uneasy." The second night brought stranger events. Their lanterns, though newly filled, dimmed without cause. In one photograph, taken by Price, the foreground shows Hale with a notebook in hand. Behind him, faint but visible, is a smear of light resembling
A human outline, blurred as if in motion. Price insisted no one was standing there at the time. On the third day, they attempted to inspect the sealed shaft. The brickwork, by then cracked with age, bore fresh marks. Long, vertical scratches. Hale pressed his ear to the wall and claimed to hear a faint tapping. The others listened, and some swore they heard it too. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. That evening, Cross wrote again. "I confess I am shaken. These are not tricks of fancy. I heard the knocks myself." Price refuses to take further photographs. He says the glass plates reveal more than we should see. Her final entry is dated August 12th. The voices came after midnight, low, many together like men laboring in chorus. They spoke no tongue, I know, yet the sound chilled me. Hale begged us to leave at dawn. We shall. What happened next is uncertain. Hale's published article never appeared. His notes from the trip are lost. Price abandoned photography altogether, and his surviving plates from the expedition were later donated anonymously to the county archives. As for Eleanor Cross, she never returned to Philadelphia. Her family filed a missing person report in September of 1930. It was quietly dropped a year later. The only surviving testimony comes from Hale, who spoke once of the journey to a friend. Never again. His words, later repeated in correspondence, were stark. "We did not enter the mine. The mine entered us." By 1931, Blackwood was a name avoided. No further expeditions were permitted. The county ordered the ground filled with earth and planted with trees. On official maps, the colliery vanished, reduced to blank space. Yet whispers endured. Children spoke of a woman in white, wandering the woods, calling out in a voice too deep to be hers. Hunters reported finding their dogs refusing to enter certain clearings, and in the coldest nights, some claimed to hear the muffled ring of picks, as if struck from beneath the soil. The Depression swallowed these accounts, as it did so many lives, but the evidence remains. In newspapers yellowed with age, in scratched photographs, in fragments of testimony written in trembling hand. And still, through all of it, a single refrain echoes. They are below.
By the late 1930s, the Blackwood Colliery had been erased from most official records. The Depression left little appetite for ghost stories, and those who remembered were old, tired, and reluctant to speak. The earth had been filled, trees planted, maps redrawn. To an outsider, there was no trace that a mine had ever existed. But archives have a way of keeping what memory forgets. In 1941, during preparations for military training grounds, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers surveyed parts of Schuylkill County. One of their reports, buried in the National Archives, mentions anomalous subsurface echoes near the site of the former Blackwood mine. The surveyors recorded hollow sounds, as if chambers exist beneath, though maps show no such tunnels. The recommendation was simple: unsuitable for construction. No further comment was made. A decade later, in 1952, a local historian named Arthur Quinn attempted to revive the legend in a pamphlet about Pennsylvania folklore. He described Blackwood as a place where men were eaten by the earth. quoting the old stories of the Molly Maguires and the missing miners. Few paid attention. Yet buried in his notes is a curious detail. He claimed to have received an anonymous package containing one cracked glass plate. The image, faint but discernible, shows the sealed brick wall of the south shaft. Across the surface, written in chalk, are words that appear to read, "Let us out." Quinn never explained where the plate came from. He died in 1955, and the plate has since vanished. Only his typed description remains. For decades, the story lay dormant, but then came the age of rediscovery, the 1970s and 80s, when old mining lands were reconsidered, reclaimed, and sometimes excavated. Local enthusiasts began to seek the lost site of Blackwood. Some claim to have found it, marked by unnatural depressions in the ground where no vegetation would grow. In 1983, a group of amateur spelunkers announced they had located an entry point. Within days, they retracted the claim. One of them, speaking anonymously, said only, "We heard knocking, we will not go back." Today, the precise location of Blackwood is uncertain. The land has shifted, records obscured, and the hills reclaimed by forest. Some say this was deliberate, that county officials ensured no map would ever lead curious seekers to the true spot. Yet from time to time, stories resurface. In 1997, hikers reported lights moving among the trees at night, lanterns, they said, swinging slowly in procession. In 2004, a local archivist reviewing microfilm discovered an unpublished draft of Hale's article from 1930. The first lines remain legible. "What we found at Blackwood was not absence, but presence. The mine is not dead. It waits." The rest of the draft is missing, torn from the reel.
Even in the present day, residents of Schuylkill County will tell you, in lowered voices, that the land remembers. Some refuse to build homes in certain tracts. Others leave offerings of salt and bread at the edges of the woods. And there are those who insist they hear it still, the slow, deliberate knocking from beneath the ground. 3 knocks. Always 3. What began as a story of labor unrest, of the Molly Maguires and the struggles of immigrant miners, has become something else entirely. A haunting without end, rooted not in superstition, but in documents, photographs, and testimonies scattered across archives. Was it merely hysteria, a chain of accidents and fears woven into legend? Or did Blackwood open on to something deeper, something that devoured the men who labored there, and calls out still? There is no final answer. The records stop, the testimonies end, yet the silence of official history is not the same as truth. Because sometimes, late at night, archivists swear that old photographs change, that in the blurred corners of plates once thought empty, new shapes emerge, faces pressing against glass, eyes wide and watching. And always beneath it all, the sound of earth shifting, as if something waits, still knocking, still patient, beneath the hills of Pennsylvania. And perhaps, still listening.